Hello and welcome back to Shoogly Shed Motors. The Kawasaki GT550, which is obviously behind me, tractor inspired bobber. As you can obviously see behind me, the tractor seat from the last episode, and we also fitted the big sort of wide handlebars. The next thing I mentioned that I wanted to tackle was foot controls or foot pegs, foot positioning, that kind of thing. So someone in the comments of the last video said that it would be cool to fit kind of old style tractor footboards, which I quite like the idea of. And I mentioned about bobbers being that kind of 1940s Harley sort of kind of military bike that got the back end sort of cut off it and things. And if you look at those bikes, they also have floorboards or footboards. So it seems kind of appropriate to try and kind of do that, to try and make footboards that match into that style, meld that kind of tractor vibe that I'm going for with, you know, faithful kind of bobber footboards. So I think that's probably what I'm going to go for. Currently they're just sort of generic Japanese motorcycle rubber foot pegs, so we're going to have to get rid of them, and then I want to move everything forward, and moving foot pegs or footboards forward means that all the foot controls also have to be relocated or extended or whatever. So yeah, that's a whole big kettle of fish, but I've done it a couple of times now. I did it on the VMAX, I've done it on the XP750, so I know the ins and outs of doing it. I just know that it takes a bit of jiggery pokery, but we can definitely do it. So let's take a look at the right hand side of the bike to begin with. It's probably the easier one to begin with. It's just basically your foot pedal. The gear linkage on the other side is a little bit more complicated, but yeah, let's get started. So first things first, what are we working with? Well, like I said, your regular kind of Japanese motorbike rubber foot pegs. They just bolt on to the kind of mounting plate here. The mounting plate obviously also has the pivot for the brake pedal, and then it also has an exhaust bracket. I've got a cool idea for an exhaust for this bike, so I'm not going to be using this portion, more or less from the collector box backwards. So I'm probably going to hack that off there, and then that will give me a bit more free space here to work. And also it will allow me to lose most of this bracket. So I'm probably going to chop this. There's a brake pedal stop behind here, so I need to leave a portion of it there for that. But then obviously take the foot peg off. Yeah, there's some things to play about with. So what I'm going to do is get some spanners out and just start taking some bits off. Maybe get the grinder out and, you know, lop a few parts off. And then kind of, yeah, see where we get to. Well, that's a decent amount of, to use my favourite word, detritus removed. taking the foot pedal off just now, probably because I'm going to bend, cut and lengthen it for a footboard. However, I'm looking at mounting options and sort of footboard design. If I just grab a little piece of wood here to represent said footboards, they're going to have to be, can't be too far in because the engine casing's in the way. A bit further out. I'm thinking that kind of position. Can't have them too high because then the front engine casing gets in the way, and I don't want them all the way that far forward. It's probably somewhere there. I quite like the idea of just keeping them quite wide and out the way. I mean, you're never going to be laying this bike on its side round corners. It's not that kind of bike. So yeah, you might ground one of these at some point, but you're probably riding the bike out with its scope at that point. But yeah, that kind of position. So I've got a couple of options for mounting. Obviously we've got the lower frame rail here. I don't want to, or can't mount anything that would obstruct the engine being removed from the frame. That said, this engine mount that's fixed there is at this height, so is there any upper engine mounts? I don't think there are any upper engine mounts. I think it's just the front, sort of upper front I suppose, and upper rear here, but there's nothing on the top of the engine. So I think when these mounts are taken out, the engine basically goes up and out. So I do have a little bit of room to play with here that shouldn't, you know, hem the engine in. The only other consideration is, say for example, you wanted to remove the clutch. You probably would just have to take the footboard off in order to get to that. I mean, for the frequency with which you would be in at your clutch, I suppose that's not too big an issue. Especially if it's just a couple of bolts and maybe a brake lever or something just to dismount to get the clutch off. I think that's a reasonable compromise for getting the right positioning. So yeah, it would be a big change from having that peg there to having a footboard there, and I think that would give you more of that kind of bobber feel. So with that said, I'm probably going to have to, I toyed with the idea of reusing the mount here. May still use that just because I've got it there. You know, no other reason than that. Have a bar come down to the side of a footboard there, that kind of idea, and then all I would need is something on the frame here. So some kind of like a length of bar with a hole threaded, drill a hole in the frame, plug it with that bar, weld it, and then I basically have a very strong threaded mounting portion that we can then build bracketry off in order to mount a footboard, and then we'll cross the brake pedal conundrum when we come to it. I think that's probably going to be my best option, without going so far as to start moving the whole brake actuator arm setup, so I'd rather not mess about with that too much. Yeah, why don't we machine a little bit of bar, and then yeah, take it from there. So, footboards. I've been rummaging through my scrap and I found this. This is a drain cover, very thick steel, as you can see, and I can see footboards in this. So if I split this down the middle and then cut off the corners, get these cool kind of trapezoid, is that the word? Shape board that has that kind of like industrial agricultural feel to it with the holes through it, but still has, you know, a bit of uniqueness to it. And I love the idea of using something like this that has been sitting in my scrap for a number of years. You know, it's actually just a terrible justification for my obsession with keeping scrap metal, but I think that could be pretty cool. So I feel like it's worth just cutting this up and trying it out and seeing what they're like and seeing if I like it. It's just steel plate that's been like laser cut, but it does have that kind of cast iron kind of shapely quality to it, and perhaps even if I sandblast it and give it that kind of pitted texture, it might even give the appearance of cast iron, you know, that kind of idea. But I think first things first, I'll get the grinder out, slice it up a little bit and see what the shape looks like. Yeah, I'm quite excited by that. Literally just going through my scrap to get some inspiration, and this popped up and immediately I thought I could do something with that. So yeah, let's see what we can rustle up. I think that's pretty cool. Total agricultural chunk. Yeah, gonna go with them. I'm dead chuffed with them. For something that, like I say, was kicking about in my scrap pile for years. I think they look awesome. They have that total bobber vibe to them. Yep. And then we got our foot pedal run along here. With the brake out here. Perfect. Love it. So I need to think about next some brackets for these to bolt onto and the kind of position that I want them in. Once I get this side in position, then I can sort of mirror that on the left hand side of the bike. So yeah, let's go rummaging for some more bits of metal and see if we can make up some brackets. Continuing my wobbling efforts, I got the old foot peg that we removed and I've cut the bracket off it. Is that way around? So it was mounted like that. So I've cut the foot peg off and I've got the bracket, which gives me the perfect bracket to go into this hole here. Screw that up. And now that can go into there like that. That works pretty well. Right down there. So I reckon if we get the welder out and stick that on there, it'll be easier to build the front mount from the mount that we've fitted into the frame onto the front. Just another bracket. But that's a nice thick piece of steel there. That's the perfect sized hole. Yeah, I'm loving the recycling aspect of this build so far. Definitely saving me a few pennies. Cool, so footboard mounted up. This is obviously the brake lever and the brake pedal. That on there. Clearly that's obviously completely the wrong place now. However, we can modify it. So I probably want this portion of it to be right up the front here, so that your foot's in the footboard and you just lift your foot to use that brake pedal, just like, you know, like a Harley footboard, or even tractors have the big brakes and clutches and things like that. So similar kind of idea. I'm probably going to heat this and bend it in the way. Not a huge amount, just maybe 10 mil, just to keep it as tight into this bracket as possible and leave as much space on the footboard. Run it along the gap back here to here, and then have either this or something different. Actually, I quite like that over here. So I think first of all we'll bend it, then maybe cut this and fabricate the extension portion of it. Well, I'm dead chuffed with them. I think they are so cool. Feels a bit odd to sit on if you're used to like just normal foot pegs, because you do have to sort of lift your foot a bit to press the brake pedal. But I don't think that's too dissimilar to just bikes like Harleys and things like that have footboards, judging by photos I've looked at anyway. And also that kind of, if you watch someone on a tractor, like they've got their foot almost just sitting on the foot controls. So it's not, it's not way off the mark. Like I said, a lot of this is sort of form over function a little bit. Just making a cool looking bike. Maybe that certain aspects of it perhaps aren't quite as ergonomic as other bikes I've built, but this is just a bit of fun, isn't it? I'm enjoying building this. Really liking the fabrication. But yeah, obviously all I did there was just extended this foot brake pedal. I've reused the actual sort of flat pedal bit itself, shaped it all, blended it all so it looks like one kind of forged piece of steel, which is pretty cool. If that gets powder coated or whatever, it'll look even better. Brake works nicely. Yeah, happy with that. Onto the left hand side, which has the gear shifts. That's going to be quite a bit more complicated. Gear shifts obviously there. The other thing that I hadn't really thought about is the kickstand. And judging by the height of the footboard on the other side, that kickstand is going to be right in the way. So I propose cutting this off and moving it to the front of the frame. That's probably going to be the best way to go about it. a lot of bobbers and choppers and things like that, the kickstand I should say is mounted at the front of the frame, so that's not a huge deal. I think it's just a case of a cut in there and a cut in there, and it should just come off. So maybe try and do that first if I can get into it. Might not be easy, but yeah, see if we can get an angle grinder blade into that and take this off, because it's going to need to be out of the way. Alright, the stand's obviously now moved along quite substantially. I'll probably need to heat and bend and manipulate the stand just to get it into the right position, but for the time being it kicks out quite nicely out the way, and until I get the footboard in I'm not sure how tight up I want to tuck it. So I'm just going to kick it out the way just now, and I'm going to take the foot peg mounting off. Nice and simple. Some Allen bolts into these ones. My other footboard, going somewhere there-ish. A bit lower, I think, actually. Somewhere down here. So obviously the next thing that's in the way is this gear linkage here. So yeah, probably best just take that off as well. Right, just drop that out of the way just now. Okay. It's going to be the best way to do this. Probably want to take a distance from the footboard to the frame rail from the other side, and that will give me how far out I'm going. And then up and down wise, I don't know, take a height, angles. This is the tricky bit, I told you, I warned you. Okay, so we got that mount welded into the frame, and I've made up another sort of bracket which I have loosely bolted into position here. So to get the angles right of the other side, I'm going to employ the use of a little digital angle finder. These are great. I picked this up online for a few quid. Probably not the most accurate, but accurate enough for this application. So all I'm going to do is turn it on, and I'm going to zero it on the bench. And I'm going to quickly take a reading from the other side. I've got 13.5 degrees. 13.5 degrees here. .44. That's pretty good. 13.48. Not going to get much closer than that. So that is the same angle as the other one. So with the footboard on there, I'm going to tack it just at one corner, so I've still got a little bit of movement in it. I'll measure the heights of the back point of the other footboard and the front point of this one, and see if we can get it to the right height as well. Just make sure that we're all close. I mean, it doesn't need to be millimetre perfect, but it needs to be pretty damn close for the position to feel comfortable and not like you've got 1 foot higher than the other or anything silly like that. So yeah, we'll measure some heights, get it tacked on, play about with it till I'm happy, and then we'll make full welds on this side and make up a bracket for this side. Okay, so obviously I got the angle correct, I tacked it in the corner, manipulated it sort of inwards and outwards to get the distance between the back of the footboard and the frame and the front of the footboard and the frame to match the opposite side. Make sure the height of the front is level on the other side, and the same with the back. And then I've welded it fully, took it off, welded the underside, and I've dressed the weld back at the top just to make it look a bit more finished. But that's effectively that footboard in the position it's going to be. And then I just need to make a bracket for the rear portion. So obviously on the other side we used the sort of brake pivot foot plate section, which we've taken off from this side. So I do have the options of the old mountings for that foot plate from this side. Little threaded sort of brackets here. Don't need 2 of them. I'll probably lop off the top one and use the bottom one. And that would just be a case of a small bracket between there, and that should hold that nice and firm. So yeah, out with the grinder I think, chop this bracket off, and I'll just put a weld across the top of it to secure it, and then we'll make a bracket, get that welded on, and then that's the left hand foot plate, or left foot plate I should say, in position. That feels awesome. That to me feels like a bobber. Really quite comfortable actually. With that footboard in position now, the next thing obviously I need to think about is the gear shift. So, I've been having a wee think and some research and other such things. And with a bobber and this kind of style, I think it would be damn cool to have like a jockey shift. So, sometimes called a suicide shifter, which isn't really... If you look it up, a suicide shift doesn't really exist. Got the reference from suicide shift because you'd be using a toe clutch, and it was basically for bikes that like didn't have a front brake, like with choppers. It was very hard to use your right foot on the rear brake and then your left foot on the clutch as well. If you put your left foot down to stop yourself falling over, you'd obviously be letting your clutch out, and if the bike's got quite a lot of torque and you're still in gear, you could go firing off into traffic. This bike has the advantage that it will have front brakes, so you will have some kind of control over your stopping. Stopping in neutral is obviously the best, but if you stop in gear, you can put your left foot on a clutch pedal and put your right foot down and apply the front brake. That would work for like hill starts and stuff as well. That does give me two problems. Instead of just trying to come up with a toe shift, that would mean coming up with a toe clutch. And with the old Harleys and stuff, that works quite well because the clutch is on this side of the bike, or at least the transmission, like the belt drive, the primary belt drive is on this side. Whereas obviously the clutch on a Japanese bike is on the other side. So that makes one problem. Second problem is that the gear shift, like shifting actuator rod, is tucked away under here. So if I'm doing a jockey shift, i.e. up the back, so you reach behind to shift, I would need to either come up with some kind of linkage arrangement or extend that bar somehow to have the shifter back here. Not 100% sure. Could possibly have the shifter in front, but then you're trying to reach down by your knee, which is maybe slightly more awkward than just reaching behind. Yeah, some thoughts to be had. It may be easier just to stick a toe shift on it, but then is the easy option the most fun? Probably not. The engineering challenge of coming up with a toe clutch, or a foot clutch I should say, and then jockey shift, I quite like that. Yeah. So if I were to go for a jockey shift, there's a pivot under here which the gear toe shift used to sit on, and then obviously the gear shaft is back here. The clutch is cable actuated just now, obviously from the hand lever. So if I can come up with some kind of pedal that sits on this pivot in here, which is then on a cable that goes to the clutch on the other side of the bike, we could have a toe clutch relatively easily. So I think that would probably be the best solution for this, is to modify and reuse this gear shift and turn it into a clutch pedal, and then extend or have like a bent bar that comes out to a jockey shift up here. I think that would be cool. So let's tackle the clutch first. If we can make a mechanism that can engage and disengage the clutch smoothly or successfully, then that is half the battle. And making a shifting stick is a lot easier, I think. That's just a little bit of fabrication. This is a little bit more engineering. Right, annoyingly I thought I'd pressed record but I hadn't. Basically what I've done is I had to beef that up because it just wasn't strong enough. So I've used a much thicker piece of metal there that the cable can slot into, and then the lever goes onto the pivot, and then that's our cable secured in there. Wow, that's going to be very strange, shifting like this. Very strange indeed. I was really happy with the concept of the foot clutch, but I felt like the execution could have been better, so I've just spent this morning basically reworking the idea. I moved the pivot, so the pivot was obviously on the crankcase here. I've made an extension and moved the pivot back the way to get more leverage, and then I've also made a new foot pedal itself out of some nice stainless bar. I just think it's a bit more aesthetic and a bit nicer than a kind of, you know, noodled gear lever. Yeah, and then because I've moved the pivot, I also had to make this little extension and bring the cable kind of barrel holder back. But we do now have a much easier to operate clutch. Like I can even do it by hand now with that amount of leverage. It's really smooth. So that will be even nicer and much more like, well, easier to use basically with your foot. You're not kind of stomping on the clutch so much. You can modulate it a bit better and get that control from the clutch. I've also put a kink in it and bent it quite high so that you can actually sit your foot under it when you're just cruising, and then when you want to shift gear or use the clutch, you just swing your foot round and press down on the lever. That works exceptionally well. I'm really glad I put the time and effort into reworking that, because it was one of these things that I was happy with, but I kind of deep down knew I could do better. So I think that's a vast improvement. So we've got our foot clutch. Next thing is our jockey shift. Under here is obviously the gear output, not the gear shift shaft, not the output shaft. That's on the drive shaft. This is the gear shift shaft under here, and I've got the old splined clamp that goes onto it that used to link up to the gear linkage. Probably going to use that and just weld directly onto it more of this stainless bar so it's matching to come up and around the side, and then just terminate sort of here-ish. Not too high, don't want loads of leverage, you just want enough that you can shift the gears comfortably, and yes, sort of reaching kind of under your leg to do so. Your foot will obviously be here, the calf there, so kind of want it to be up and out the way so that you're not you're not coming into contact with your leg and it's not getting in the way when you're sat on the bike. So yeah, we'll get some bar and that clamp and heat the bar, bend it a little bit, very similar to this, and then yeah, weld it together, maybe make a nice top for it. Should be easy enough. Right, well, very simple, but that is a jockey shift now. As you saw there from me just testing it out, it's back and forward. I've got the back wheel jacked up just now, but I can show you that it goes into gear, back into neutral. Got the clutch as well, and I like that they're both made out of this matching stainless bar. Now that's quite a nice touch, and I think it was definitely worth the effort to rework this. I quite like it just as a stick, but I think I will make a little gear knob for it on the lathe, possibly out of aluminium, polish it up nicely. So it'll just be involving cutting some threads on there, and the corresponding threads into the knob and screwing it on. I'll probably do that maybe in a separate video, just some nice lathe work. That might make a nice little episode. But aside from that, that is the footboards and foot controls all done. Well, I hope you'll agree that the footboards definitely suit the style of the bike, and sort of tractor vibe plus that kind of, you know, old school bobber vibe, especially with that foot clutch and jockey shifter. It's definitely bringing those agricultural bobber vibes, which I'm pretty psyched about. I'm liking the direction that this build's going, and I hope you are too. As usual, please do give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you subscribe to the Shoogly Shed channel. I appreciate all the support, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.